Hi all, thank you for joining our HelloSign webinar, 5 Ways to Increase Revenue by Changing Your Workflows. It's 10 o'clock right now, but we're going to wait just a few more seconds to let those final people trickle in. And then Whitney will go ahead and be kicking us off in just under a minute.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is Whitney Bauk, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at HelloSign. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm relatively new to the company, and I'm really excited to be here to kick off today's session, which I think you're going to find very, very valuable. Well, here at HelloSign, we're really about helping you automate all the processes, steps, and workflows that surround getting a legally binding signature on just about anything. It could be a document, a contract, really a form, anything that needs that signature on it. By automating that, we obviously help you get to customer satisfaction more quickly, but maybe most importantly, we help you get to revenue more quickly. What we're hosting in our session today is 5 ways to increase revenue by changing your workflows. And naturally, we'd love to be your business partner to help you do that. To walk you through those 5 great tips, with me here is Claire Murdo. So let me introduce her and hand it off to Claire to take you through the session today.
All right, thank you so much for that great intro, Whit. And I wanted to thank all of you for joining us. As Whit mentioned, my name is Claire Murdo, and I'm the Chief Content Creator and Manager here at HelloSign. And as she also mentioned, we offer the easiest way to sign paperwork online and automate paper workflows. So today, I'm really excited to dive into a topic that we think every day about here at HelloSign, which is how to build these better workflows to support your company. And workflow is a term that you'll hear a lot in an office, but it's also it's one of those jargony business phrases that's easy to use without really understanding what it means. So before we get started with the content of the webinar, I wanted to go briefly over our definition of workflow here at HelloSign. So what is considered a workflow? You'll see a definition pop up, and that's how we generally think about it here in the office. And a workflow can be as simple as the process that your support team takes to respond to customer emails, and as complicated as the series of steps it takes to get approval for a really big project at a company. And so you see what they are, but really, why would we talk about them, and why are they important? And ineffective workflows or slow workflows put a lot of friction on a company's goals. And that's very challenging when you're trying to reach a larger goal at your company. And so as you can imagine, though, with so many different teams and departments, there are a lot of ineffective workflows in any office. So for this webinar, what we did is we narrowed it down to 5 different workflows that you can improve that have a direct tie to revenue. And you can take a look at a sneak peek up on the screen. One last thing before we get into the specifics is that we're going to have a few examples running throughout the presentation. So what we did is we actually created a fictional company that will help you to see how our examples apply to an average company. So we've called it Acme Co., and you'll hear me referring to Acme as I apply numbers based on our research. So here's a little bit of information about Acme. Acme has 100 employees, and it also has the standard department spread of any company, which you'll see popping up there. And because we, like equality, each employee has an average annual salary of $56,000, and we chose that based on the median salary in the U.S. So now that we have the, scene laid, and we have about 25 minutes, we're going to dive right in. I did want to mention that if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the dialog box that you'll see on your screen. We'll be setting aside some time to answer these questions at the end of the webinar. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So to start off, let's take a look at one of the most obvious practices that can be improved in any office. And that's how you or your team deal with repetitive tasks. Now, I'm sure that you can all imagine things that you do over and over again each day. Maybe it's that you have to answer the same emails day after day. Maybe you have to send the same contracts to vendors every single week. And these things are really annoying and time-consuming and a big issue at companies, but they're also costly for companies as well when you translate it into what that time cost looks like in dollars. So let's take a look at some numbers. A study by Redwood Software found that 99% of organizations spend considerable time doing repetitive manual tasks. And almost two-thirds of respondents said they actually spent over a quarter of their time doing so. So if we want to take a look at a more specific example, we can do that. Marketers spend 1/3 of their time on repetitive tasks. That's huge, especially when you translate that into revenue. So as I mentioned before, we'll be using Acme Co. to crunch our numbers. So let's take a look at an Acme marketer who spends 1/3 of their time on repetitive tasks. So taking the average salary of $56,000 and assuming a 40-hour work week, 1/3 of a marketing employee's time would translate into 600 hours per year. And if you were to take that and translate it into cost, that's an annual cost of over $19,000. And that's just, keep in mind, that's just for a single marketer. If Acme had a team of just 5 marketers, the cost of repetitive tasks would be over $97,000. And if you were to take those calculations and you were to apply them to time, it would actually break down that a team of 5 would also spend almost 5 months out of the year devoting themselves to repetitive tasks. The most important thing here is to think about the implications of that. Imagine if those marketers were able to devote 5 extra months on strategic campaigns or focus on higher return projects. When you're dealing with a lot of repetitive tasks, there's a huge opportunity lost that comes along with that. And it's important also to remember that this challenge isn't just in marketing teams. Every single member of a team or individual contributor has a long list of tedious or boring tasks. So when you multiply the cost across multiple teams or departments, it's easy to see the huge loss there, or opportunity for loss. So now that we've gone ahead and we've laid out the problem, what can companies do to improve it? And what we recommend is you start off by actually identifying where recurring tasks are happening. And to do this, you want to talk to your employees. They're experts in their day-to-day. They know what they do well and what's challenging. And so ask them about their everyday workflows. And what you want to do is you want to take red flags when you hear, or take notes about red flags when you hear things that might indicate that there's an inefficient workflow happening or that things are happening over and over again. And we have a list of recommendations for places to start. These include things like copying and pasting if that's happening, or if employees are sending the same documents out again and again. Anytime manually filling in information. And this last one that we threw up there is to look really at where there seems to be a lot of human error. Because in this last case, think about data entry and how many errors are made when info is put in manually by an employee. And when you hear any of these red flags, these are areas that should really be first in line to be figured out, to figure out how to reduce or automate these places where there's a lot of repetitive tasks. For example, if you see that an employee is manually filling in the same information into the same document over and over again, there are ways to automate that process and to remove the need for manual entry entirely, which again would free up that employee's time. And if you can automate even one repetitive task in an employee's day, you automatically gift them the time that they can then devote to higher value tasks. And we are actually going to take a look at a few more specific examples in our next section. All right, so moving on. Number 1 applies to a lot of different office workflows, but we're going to drill into a specific case now, which is how to improve the employee onboarding workflow. And we chose onboarding because, believe it or not, onboarding has a really very big effect on revenue. And how good or bad your onboarding flow is can really help or hurt a company's employee retention rate, which of course has a direct tie to the health of their revenue and the stability of that company. And if you're really looking at onboarding, look at it this way. If you had a really terrible first day at a company, how would that affect how you think about that company? It could influence the rest of your experience there for better or for worse, and that has implications for your company as well. So let's take a look at some numbers. According to a recent study by SHRM, nearly half of all hourly workers leave new jobs in the first 4 months. And according to another study by the Corporate Executive Board, about 4% of employees leave after a new job just after a disastrous first day. They don't even stay past that first day. Now, keep in mind that it can cost up to 150% of a departing employee's salary to replace them, which is a huge problem for companies. But luckily, studies have also shown that there is a direct connection between good onboarding and higher employee retention. So if you can figure out a way to improve your onboarding, you can have that positive correlation with a higher retention rate. Statistically, if you want to look at some numbers, a strong onboarding program can reduce employee turnover from 44% to 14%. And there's a great study by Aberdeen which also shares a few of the added benefits of a really good onboarding program. And these include things like a higher engagement from that new hire and just general better HR productivity. So again, now that we see the problem laid out, what is it that you can do to improve your onboarding workflow in your company? And what we did is we broke it down into 4 simple steps that you can take. And the first one that you want to focus on, or first step here, is you'll want to determine what your churn rates are like for the first year, your employee churn rates. So this will give you a great baseline for how you can improve and give you those foundational numbers. So let's go back to our example company of Acme. And remember that Acme has 100 people. And each employee has that annual salary of $56,000. So let's say that the churn rate here at this company is 15%. Just as a side note, the average churn rate at a company is about 10%, but we're focusing on particularly bad onboarding here. So Acme has a bad onboarding. They've lost 15% of their employees in a year. And so that churn rate means that you have lost 15 employees at Acme over the last year. And since each employee costs about 150% of the salary to replace, that works out to $84,000 lost per employee. And when you add that up, it actually comes to a grand total of over $1 million of lost revenue due to this churn. And that does include their base salary, but it's pretty shocking when you see the numbers. And so as you calculate your churn, you might also see some pretty big, scary numbers. And so what you want to do next is to go ahead and to analyze your existing onboarding program so you can see where there are areas for improvement and where there's room for improvement. And so as you do that, here are a few questions you might want to ask yourself. Examples being that, are you giving people the right directions with their new hire paperwork? Is your onboarding long enough? What materials are you giving new hires in addition to the basic paperwork? And how are they accessing these materials? Is it easy or difficult? What is that process like? And what you want to do is you want to take a look and note down any bottlenecks here, because these are your challenge areas, and these are really the areas that signal that there might be something that needs to be fixed. And so once you go ahead and you identify the bottlenecks, what you want to do is you want to figure out how to improve and automate them. So we have a basic onboarding flow that we're going to show you. And you can see that it starts, from the offer letter extended. They have to decide to work there, and then it extends all the way to a monthly check-in. And actually, you probably want to extend it past a monthly check-in. Average onboarding is 90 days with companies, a lot of companies taking it farther than that. So this is just showing one section. But an area, you see them all laid out. An area that we'd like to suggest improving is how your employees interact with paperwork in the onboarding process and how easy it is for them to complete that paperwork and return it back to you. For example, in onboarding, you can hand an employee bits and pieces of a new hire paperwork packet, and you can give them a document here and a piece of paper there, and you can extend it over the course of a week or 2 weeks. But alternatively, you can have it all ready for them on an online bundle. It's more convenient. It helps you to keep everything together. It makes it easy for them to fill it out and also to return it to you, and for you to kind of track where they are at this in their paperwork cycle for actually onboarding to the company. It's just more organized. And then once you go ahead and figure out ways that maybe you can improve parts of the cycle, what you would want to do is you want to go ahead and you want to roll out your new onboarding or improved onboarding program. And it's important here to measure the success of your changes as well, because you're, constant improvement. You're going to want to continue to improve over time and to optimize. So this is a really great opportunity to think about where you can build feedback into the process. For example, in a post-hire survey, you can ask your employees something as simple as, how would you rate your onboarding experience here on a scale of 1 to 10? Just insights like this can be great for giving you some additional information for how you might want to change this onboarding in the future. And employees are usually pretty happy to give you insight, but you have to make sure that you build in that opportunity for them to give it to you. Okay, so moving right along, we're going to hop into our next section. Build in feedback. Got that slide right there. So the third section that I'd like to focus on now, since we've already focused on improving repetitive tasks and improving company onboarding, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at improving workflows that are top of mind for a lot of business leaders, which are the sales workflows. It makes sense. Sales are a direct lifeline to revenue, and so an efficient sales team is really invaluable to a company. And companies typically spend a lot of time trying to figure out how they can turn the sales team into a predictable machine, because once they do that, there's just a more predictable flow to support the company. But the nature of a sales process also makes it pretty tough to hack. So there are just a lot of different variables affecting each stage, and that makes it kind of really challenging and nearly impossible to control every single thing in a sales process. For example, you can't really control a prospect's budget, whether your solution or your product or your company might be in that budget, and you can't control whether a prospect flakes out on a meeting. But there are, however, quite a few areas where you do have control over the sales process. And those are the ones that you want to focus on as you consider improving your workflows. For example, you can control how you prospect. You can control how consultative or aggressive your sales pitch is. You can control how you send over an official contract, stuff like that. And once you look at those areas and what you have control over, that's where you want to improve. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to focus on two parts of the sales cycle here, and you'll see them highlighted. We're going to talk about how to make the beginning of a sales cycle a little bit faster and the end of the sales process a little bit faster. And these are two areas that it's great to improve because, beginning and really critical parts of that whole cycle. So what we're going to do first, start out with prospecting. So prospecting is one of the most time-consuming parts in the sales process, but it's also really important, obviously. Unfortunately, it's really easy for sales development reps to spend a lot of time gathering incorrect data or reaching out to poor leads that never respond. And so it's very costly. It breaks down to be very costly that SDRs are spending a lot of time on inefficient prospecting workflows. So let's take a look at Acme again so we can apply some numbers. Say that you have a sales development rep at Acme who spends an average of 4 hours a day just hunting down information about prospects. Per SDR, that works out to over 1,000 hours a year. And if you were to take that and equate it to a salary, that actually works out to be over $29,000 per year per SDR spent hunting down information. And as you scale your SDR team, of course, you can plan to scale that cost as well. But imagine if they could redirect that time into higher value things like evaluating their prospects more closely and analyzing trends and really putting time and energy into higher return tasks. You could recoup a lot of that spend there. So what can you do to speed up this part of the sales cycle? What you want to do is you want to find maybe a way to collect data more efficiently. For example, by scraping data as you prospect. And this can save you a lot of time and, as a result, a lot of money. At HelloSign, we use a tool that scrapes publicly available info, and it's based on demographic info that's already out there, but we don't have to hunt it down from multiple sources. It all kind of aggregates into one spot. And so if you can do this for your SDRs, you can shave down the time that it's taking them to prospect. There's actually a really huge return. So for a team of 5 SDRs, if you were to assume an annual contract value of $5,000, and if you could reduce research done on each prospect by just 4 minutes, you can actually yield more than $1 million in revenue annually. So there's even things that might seem like they're small and pretty obvious fixes can have such a huge effect on the bottom line. So now that we've taken a look at the first part, let's take a look at the last part of the sales process as well. And that would be closing the opportunity. So if you close a deal, you have the power to make it very easy or difficult for a prospect to sign the contract. And so what I do is focus on, of course, making it easier. So you can do this. A lot of companies do this by using online contracts. And if you didn't already know what we do, our whole business is dedicated to this part of the sales cycle. We live it day to day, and this is what we do at HelloSign, so we're very familiar with how important this last piece is. And when sales teams use us to send contracts online, it makes it really simple for a prospect to view and sign a contract without having to go through any external processes like printing. Also, sometimes people have questions about this, but it's completely legally binding, and the e-signatures that we provide are legally binding. So you're getting the same thing. You're getting legal signatures that you would if you were using a paper contract with pen and paper signatures. But what you're doing that's going to put you ahead is you're collecting all of this stuff much more conveniently, and you're offering them to give it to you much more conveniently. Another thing to think about is that online contracts can also be tracked more easily than paper contracts. So, for example, if you send a contract online, you can actually go ahead and look at when it's been opened, and you can get notified when it's been viewed, when it's been signed, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. This makes it really easy to follow up when you see that a prospect's opened a document but hasn't signed it yet. So maybe they have questions. Maybe it's a good time to step in. This gives you insight that paper contracts don't actually necessarily give you. And we dug into our data a little bit just to see what it was like for sales teams that are using HelloSign. And what we saw were that sales teams using HelloSign averaged a contract turnaround time of less than a day. So compare that to the time it would take to send a contract requiring a prospect to print and sign and scan and email it back, and all the momentum that you lose, and the open window that you give to have prospects maybe object to something. Online contracts are just more convenient. They really give you the power to make that last step in the sales cycle easier, and as a result, it's easier to control that last step, which has a huge, huge benefit. All right. We're going to hop into another section now, another workflow to improve, and that is how you optimize high volumes of requests in your support teams. So obviously another place to look, inefficient workflows, if you're looking at a different department. When you look at support teams, they are busy a lot of the time. It isn't unheard of to have a support team that's kept completely heads down with a queue of tickets. But if you look at the types of tickets that a support team is answering regularly, you might start to notice a few patterns. And you might start to see that the questions and requests that are made are actually rarely unique. A lot of times when people write in, they're asking questions like, how do I do X, Y, or Z? Or how do I reset my password? And for a support team to answer these questions over and over again is really time-consuming and very costly. So let's look at an example. Let's say that a support rep at Acme spends roughly 2 hours a day answering redundant questions. Per person, that works out to be 10 hours per working week, and adding that all together, that works out to about over 500 hours per year. And for a small team of 5 support reps, that actually breaks down into a really huge amount of work week cost. It breaks down to about 21 work weeks that support is changing, or the support is focusing on redundant tasks rather than higher value tasks. So when you apply a dollar amount to that, you have actually lost over $72,000 per year for each support team member. So what do you want to do to go ahead and start improving that and to recoup those losses? A lot of companies rely on support center automation software to help manage these redundant requests. We do here at HelloSign. We actually use a service named, or that's called Zendesk. And rather than having our support team spend their minutes on password resets, they have an opportunity to spend time on more important tickets and higher value tickets. And using help desk software, you can also create triggers that look for keywords that are commonly used in certain support tickets. For example, you can use like forgot or password for password reset tickets. And your software will pick this up, and you can set an automatic flow to reset the password and alert the user. And that really boils down to one less email for your support team to manage. And imagining, if you have 50 of these requests, that's actually 50 less emails per day for your support team. So if you wanted to break it down and apply it to your company, here's how you would calculate how much your support team is dedicating to repetitive tasks. So first you'd want to pull how many emails are password resets or something similar, and then you would calculate how much time is being spent on each of these tickets. Then you would take the average, which would give you, how much you're actually spending on them, and then you can apply it to how many times a day it happens. A lot of help desk automation services can help you with this, by the way. And then to calculate, if you wanted to turn it into dollars, you could easily do that. All you would have to do is you would take the total amount of time and you would multiply that by a support rep's hourly rate. And this would translate into what you're losing because of repetitive tasks and represent what you have to regain. After you do that, what you would want to do, after you crunch the numbers, what you'd want to do is you'd want to find a help desk software that can help you automate answering these tickets. As we said before, we use Zendesk, and it's helped our support team manage all their tickets more efficiently, and it's been a really amazing system for automatically responding to common support requests. By putting this in place, this has actually freed up our support staff's time so they can focus on the higher value tasks, like working to improve our Net Promoter Score, for example, and creating additional support resources for our customers. It's a really big win. And then we've come upon our last section. We've talked a lot about all different ways that you can improve workflows. We've talked about the benefit of reducing repetitive tasks and how to improve employee onboarding, speed up the sales workflows, optimize support team's time. And for our last point, let's zoom back out. to a more general workflow improvement. And obviously it's one we hold really near and dear here at HelloSign, which is how to improve paper workflows. And it's actually really easy to make the business case for why companies should focus on improving or eliminating their paper workflows. All we would have to do is just take a look at the cost. So to do that, we're going to break it into two chunks, and that's the basic cost of paper products and the cost of managing paper. So starting with the basic cost. According to Lawrence Lab, the typical U.S. office worker uses about $80 worth of paper per year. And if we think about Acme, which is a company of 100, that works out to be $8,000 per year, just from paper alone. And that's, it's a big cost, but the bigger cost is definitely yet to come, which is the cost of managing paperwork. So let's add that management cost. There's a study that shares that average organizations spend $360 per document in labor time to search, file, or recreate each document. And for a company that deals with 100 new documents a week, that works out to $36,000 per week. And of course, if you were to just multiply that by 52 weeks in a year, you'd be at an annual cost of over $187,000 per year for just managing that paper. So in addition to that, consider that if there are these inefficient paper workflows, you might actually be hiring new people to manage all of this paper that's getting out of control. So at Acme, if you were having to hire an additional admin staff, that staff member would cost an additional $56,000 per year. So what do you want to do to get rid of these costs? Because obviously they're not great. You don't want to keep them. What you would want to do first is you want to calculate your current spend, just so you can get a good overview of where you stand. And what you would do is you would start out by adding up how much you spend on paper and also on paper products and paper management. So as you do this, think about all the different areas where there is paper, and it might surprise you that there are a lot, and also that there are a lot of just small things that you might not add to the equation that you want to make sure that you do, but it includes the actual machines that deal with paper, the machine maintenance, paper bundles, printer ink, and definitely go ahead at this point too and add in the cost of admin clerks that are just dedicated solely to managing paper. These numbers that you calculate will give you a really great baseline to improve. And then once you've done that math and you've worked that out, what you want to do is identify areas where paper can be eliminated. So look across all your departments here. You'll want to take a note about where paper is even still being used and where faxing and printing is still being required. And as you do that, it's probably going to work out pretty quickly that you'll see some departments are more reliant on paper than others. For instance, an HR team often requires employees to sign things like W-4s and I-9s, and so they're dealing with a lot of paperwork, whereas your engineering teams may not be so paper heavy. So identify those departments that are using a lot of paper. And then lastly, what you would want to do is to find a technology that you can replace paper, that helps you replace paper, or that integrates into an existing system that you have and helps you eliminate that need for printing and faxing. And so this is where we have a lot of expertise at HelloSign, and we help all sorts of departments across the company to remove paper from their workflows. So for example, recruiting, I think we mentioned it before, but offer letters, any NDAs that they're sending out, these can all be put online. And then also definitely HR teams, as they put their onboarding flows into motion, keeping it all online rather than on paper is very beneficial. And then of course, sales teams, legal teams, vendors, anywhere that there's a team that's using a contract, there's a need for eliminating paper. And I also actually wanted to mention one other thing that's kind of like a bonus thing, but a lot of people don't think about it, and that's when you have a paper contract, really only one person can look at it or view it at a time. So imagine that you have a paper in front of you and its contract needs to be signed by 10 different people. Only one person can sign it at a time. But when you put it online and you send that contract out, you can have different stakeholders view it and sign it in succession very quickly, and they don't have to be in the same place either. So this is particularly relevant for offices that are international or companies that are international, because if you have a need for someone in a UK office to sign a contract, and someone in a U.S. office that needs to sign that same contract in a short amount of time, taking it online really enables and empowers you to do that without having to add extra steps into the process. And so the real benefit here is that means it's faster to scale up with your business and to continue to include contracts that would require multiple signers and multiple stakeholders. All right. So we have come to the end, believe it or not, and we've covered a lot of ground. So just to summarize, here's everything that we have gone over. And it was also a good time to mention that if you are shopping for a solution to help you automate or improve workflows in areas like sales, HR, and admin, HelloSign is a great resource that helps teams to work smarter and to eliminate wasteful and inefficient paper workflows. And we're the perfect partner to help you if you're looking to get something signed online, to put that flow into your website or your app. A really great solution, and we'd really love for you to check us out because we apply to so many of the different departments, and we'd love to help you out there. So actually, and we have an interesting stat to share, which is we've seen teams experience an average turnaround time of 44 minutes per document. So shrinking that time down, making it less burdensome to sign a paper, and just really saving time across all departments in a company. So as a short aside, actually, we've talked a lot about different departments today, and so when we send you a recording of this webinar, which you'll get within the next couple days, we'll be including an e-guide for 2 different departments, which is how sales teams use e-signatures to sell smarter, and how HR teams can use e-signatures to hire smarter. And again, you'll see those in our follow-up email along with the recording of the webinar. So thank you for sitting through all that. Now I'm excited because we have some time for some questions, which I always get excited about. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what people have put in. Looks like there's some good questions. I think I'm just going to go ahead and start with the first one on the list, which is, how long should I expect it for teams to adopt a new product? Or how long should I expect for teams to adopt a new product? That's a really great question. And I would say the answer really depends on the timeline that you set out. What I suggest is outlining a map of how long you think it's going to take and all the steps that it would take to release a new solution that would automate a process. So like you have an older process, you want to fix it and streamline it and make it better. What you want to do is just map out when you want to introduce this tool to the team and how you want to coach them into using it, and build in a check-in as well after it's been released for a couple days or weeks or months. And giving that timeline and setting it all out gives you a lot more control over how long it will take to adopt that tool. As we mentioned earlier in our onboarding section, maybe another thing would be like to build in feedback into that process too, like have people tell you how it's working, and you can get maybe a better reaction time there. One thing that comes to mind too is HelloSign. We use anytime we adopt a new service, we have a special lunch and learn, and we go over all the hows and the whys and the ins and the outs. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so next question. Let's see. I like this question. So what's the best way to analyze a solution before choosing? So I think that's another great question. I would say that when you analyze a solution, one of the best things to do, I mean, you can go and you do your due diligence, but third-party referrals are really great. And references are also a great source of research that you can do, and you can do it pretty quickly and easily. So I would suggest going out and asking your networks for suggestions and referrals, and listening to just how they've engaged with the product, listening to their experience. I also really, really like sites like Quora because they're a great place to look for people's thoughts on products. You get a lot of information there. And lastly, and this is one that I think a lot of places usually offer, but not everyone, so you really want to make sure that this is an option. But when you're talking to a service provider or looking at a new solution, check out to make sure that they give you a full trial before you commit, because then you can play around and really see how it works in your systems. Okay, I think that's all for that one. So let's see, I think we'll do one more question, but there's some really good ones. All right. Okay. This one, we'll end with this one. So given that my team is much smaller than 100, I think they're referring, so Acme was 100. So given that my team is smaller than 100, how can I change the workflows of just a few people rather than an entire team? Okay, so how can you focus in on changing smaller sets of workflows rather than big, giant, hulking workflows? Okay. I actually think that if you're in a smaller company, you're in a really, really great position to put together this kind of roadmap for how you'd like to automate things just over the future. Of course, you want to start early. So what I would do is suggest first identifying where redundant or repetitive tasks are already showing up, even in your small team. Even you have a team of 10 and there are still repetitive things that are being done. Just keep doing that, especially early on, because you can use that info to map out where you would want to reduce these tasks in the future as you scale, stuff like that. And so you're actually in a really good spot to build out systems so that you don't have to rely on inefficient workflows. So I hope that answers your question. And I think we are going to end there. I'm going to let you guys go ahead and enjoy the day. But please, if you have any follow-up questions, please tweet us at HelloSign. That's our Twitter handle. We'll be monitoring our feed. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. We've covered a lot of ground. Really excited to share this info with you. Please look for a follow-up email with a recording of the webinar. And, of course, follow us at HelloSign on Twitter at HelloSign.com, or excuse me, follow us on Twitter at HelloSign, or visit us at HelloSign.com. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, and take care.